Well, thank you, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this session and being here this morning. And I thought what we might talk about this morning is probably the subject in the general issue of strategy and management that I spend most of my time on right now, which is sort of a new question that we haven't really thought about very much in business. And that is the relationship between business and society and the community. What we're finding today is that all around the world there's a tension between business and society. There's often a feeling by citizens that the prosperity of business is not actually making them more prosperous. The community isn't benefiting from business's growth and business's profits. As a result, I think there's many calls to regulate business, to raise taxes on business, to try to constrain business. And I think that is a path that can't lead to a good place. Because we know that business is the fundamental driver of wealth. Only business can create wealth. Only a healthy economy allows the standard of living to rise and jobs to be created. So if we have a situation where business and society are at war, we can't have a healthy business community or a healthy society. Now, I think what businesses have done is historically they've tried to deal with that problem and the growing feeling of this problem with what is usually called corporate social responsibility. Businesses have set out to be good citizens. Many businesses donate money to many community organizations. The employees of companies volunteer. And the idea is that business needs to give back. Business needs to show that it cares. And corporate social responsibility is a way of doing that. It's also broadened to be also meeting community standards in terms of the environment and things like that. But what we found is quite surprising, and that is the more companies do corporate social responsibility, the lower the trust in business. So at some level, it isn't working. And it isn't working because I think we haven't yet in business or in the broader community really understood really the root of the problem. This is a topic that I have written about recently in the Harvard Business Review in an article called Creating Shared Value. And the idea is that instead of seeing business and society as separate, what we have to understand is that those two things are inextricably connected. And actually, the greatest opportunities for business to make profit and to grow will actually come from the ability to use business principles and capitalism to address the most important problems in society, to address the problems of the environment, to address the problems of health, of water, and of poverty, of all those issues that we all know are so fundamental here in Mexico and all over the world. And the idea is that in many cases you can create shared value. By serving these needs and by doing so efficiently and productively, you can not only drive the business and make profit, but you can have a profound impact on the societal problem, whatever it is, in a way that's scalable, in a way that can roll out and serve millions and millions of people, in contrast to the model of the NGO and government, where basically you have limited resources and you can only solve the problems of a few. So the question we're now seeing in business is pondering this question of how do we create shared value? How do we broaden our thinking about who our customer is? How do we broaden our thinking about what needs we are trying to serve? How do we broaden our thinking about how we conduct ourselves in our communities in terms of the value chain? Let me just give you a few examples. In the food industry, we've had a kind of history of the food industry sort of seeing that its job was to provide more and more and more food. So what do? Well, they tried to get us to eat more. And to get us to eat more, they put in a lot of sugar and put in a lot of salt and put in a lot of fat and made the portions bigger and bigger and bigger. And they felt their job to be good businesses was to kind of get us to eat more. Even though in the end we get fat. In the end we have health problems. In the end we don't feel very good. So that's an example of business looking at a need in a traditional way, serving a traditional need using traditional approaches. Well, what if those same food companies said, gee, that's not why I'm in business. I'm in business to provide nutrition. I'm in business to provide actually health and nutrition for my customer. Well, that takes you in a whole different direction. And the same creativity and the same innovation and the same marketing sophistication, if we applied it to that need, creates shared value. It can grow the business, it can create new opportunities for differentiation and innovation and growth, but in the process it can actually address an important need of society. Well, let's take the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry in the world has had a model of serving relatively high-income customers with very expensive drugs, primarily in North America and Europe. I don't know the exact number, but I think the pharmaceutical industry in the world, the conventional industry, serves maybe 400 million people. But there's 6 billion people in the world. Okay? So here we have a whole industry built on serving a traditional customer in a traditional way with a traditional kind of product. And not really thinking about, well, how can we serve these billions of customers? And maybe they can't afford to pay the same thing. And maybe we can't use the same distribution channels. And maybe we can't use the same business models. But what if we started to innovate? And now the best pharmaceutical companies are opening up this whole game. In India, in China, in lower income communities, even in the developed world. And they're expanding their market, and they're growing. And by the way, they're creating shared value. They're driving solutions to an important set of societal needs using capitalism. Let me just sort of wrap up here, and then we can open up by saying capitalism is magic. With capitalism, an entrepreneur who invents a product or understands a need and serves it profitably creates value out of nothing. You don't have to have any oil. You create value out of nothing. We have to find a way to use this incredible power of capitalism to solve more and more and more of the problems facing society. Because if we don't, we will bump up against limited resources and limited capacity and limited efficiency and limited productivity and limited scalability. So my quest right now, and I think we're at a very important inflection point in business, is for businesses to start thinking not just about how do I maximize shareholder value, but how do I be smart capitalist but create shared value. And my prediction is that over the next 5 or 10 or 20 years, this set of questions, this set of issues, and this kind of innovation is going to be probably the most energizing and important innovation that all of us are going to have to learn about and understand. Okay, so let's open it up. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I agree capitalism is magic, but there are so many unemployed. Nowadays, there are 20 million in the States, 5 million in Spain, etc. Here we don't even have statistics of how many are unemployed in Mexico. So something's going wrong with the situation. So perhaps, why should we have to order a suit from Italy or a computer from China? If we have more localized products made locally, then there would be more unemployment, I think. More employment.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, I think that we do have major problems of employment in many parts of the world, not all parts. Many parts of the world are doing very well. But some of the countries like the U.S. that traditionally have been, have had ample jobs and employment are not generating those jobs for a whole variety of reasons. And what we find, though, is that if you set out to create jobs as opposed to build productive businesses, then you get into deep trouble. One of the problems we're having in America is we're deframing the problem as creating jobs rather than making our economy more efficient and more competitive and more innovative and more productive. And I think that similar problem exists here in Mexico and in many other countries. We have so many obstacles that are standing in the way to growing businesses, to growing companies. There's so many needs to be met. There's so much demand. So I don't think we should feel that the problem is a demand problem. I don't think that we should walk away from the notion that we should have a global economy with an efficient distribution of work across countries. But I think what we have in this global economy is we have a much more punishing environment in which countries that don't tackle fundamentals that get in the way of productivity and growth pay a much higher price than they used to. The economies used to be much more self-contained. Now they're much less self-contained. I don't think we're going to solve the problem by going backwards. What we need we need these billions of people in the world to become part of the market. But in Mexico and in America, we need to start tackling the things that are really holding back growth, like inefficient regulations, a tax system that is distortive and people evade because it's so complicated, a weakness in providing education to people so that they can be a productive worker. But it's a very challenging problem. You've put your finger on kind of the most fundamental political challenge we face now in the world, and this is true in many countries. But I would really let's not think that we can solve the problem by walling off our economies and buying everything at home. We ought to have Mexican entrepreneurs who can produce a suit in Mexico that people want at a good price. And that's the way to put the Italians out of business, But that requires innovation. That requires labor laws that are more flexible, than you have in Mexico. That requires lack of bureaucracy, that allows you to be more efficient and productive. And so we've got to deal with the underlying causes of low productivity and inefficiency, which ultimately are the things that kill jobs. Not think that it's some outside force that is causing the problem.
What is your best suggestion for those medium and small-sized entrepreneurs in Latin America to create share of value?
Yeah. I think there's an epic opportunity in Latin America. I think that probably most companies in Latin America have focused on the upper and upper middle income customer. I think the real opportunity is going to be the middle and middle lower and middle lower income customer. There's billions, millions and millions and tens of hundreds of millions. They're often in rural areas. They often they're not reached by the market. Their needs are not well met. And I'm seeing some of the most innovative stuff as I go around Latin America and really serving this market outside of Mexico City, where again there's a kind of pretty developed business community. I think the shared value opportunities are often around these customers that have sort of been outside of the mainstream market, but who are now doing a little better in some countries anyway, and who have some money to spend, but they just don't have a lot, and so you got to reinvent the product. I think there's opportunities. If I were an entrepreneur today and I was living in this country, I'd be thinking, what is Mexico's most important problems? What are the citizens of Mexico's most important problems? Security is a big problem, and I'm sure pollution is in some areas is a big problem. So let's start working on those big problems. Let's start working on those problems that affect people's lives. Let's start working on those problems that really affect people's health and their well-being and their family and their perception of their future and whether it's education. I mean, I'm seeing wonderful private education innovation in Latin America because the school system hasn't been working. So let's just give up. Let's create a new system. I'm seeing wonderful innovation in working in relatively rural areas and providing products and services that are tailored to those needs. So I think there are many opportunities. There's unlimited needs. We just have to find a way to profitably serve those needs. And we're not going to do it by selling a farmer in a rural area a refrigerator that looks like the one that we're selling to the upper income customer in Mexico City. It just so we need to innovate. We need to change the way we think. We have to relax all the constraints. And I think the business community can rise to this challenge. But right now, our biggest problem is our thinking is too narrow.
Hi. What has changed since you wrote your first book on strategy 20 years ago?
Oh, everything in it's only gotten more important. 20 years ago there was more distortions and less competition and more protection and fewer countries in which you had to compete with, and capital markets were less efficient, and as competition has opened up and globalization has happened and capital markets become more efficient, then companies increasingly more and more need to have a competitive advantage. They need to have a clear strategy. They need to make choices about how to uniquely meet needs. So the underlying principles, I think, are just get more important every year. Now, the circumstances, the technology, the nature of distribution channels, all those things constantly change. And so when we do an industry analysis today, we look at different things than we used to. In every industry, we're now always looking at the internet, and how it affects industry structure and how it affects the relationship with the channel and the customer. And when we think about suppliers, we're not just thinking about local suppliers. We're thinking about a global supply chain. And how do we do supplier analysis when we have a global supply chain? So the circumstances are always changing, but the work I do is not, it tries to look at the underlying structural foundations. And then the tool then allows you to look at any industry at any time and with those frameworks then try to understand today's circumstances and then the particular opportunities facing the particular companies. So one of the most important things about strategy now is integrating this shared value stuff. The companies that are going to succeed for the next 15 or 20 years are the companies that are going to figure out how to integrate this opportunity of the company actually addressing social needs in different ways. So, the real challenge in business is so much of business literature is about today's trend. And the idea is today's trend will continue forever, and if we're just fast in following today's trend, we'll be successful. What we found is that's usually not success. Everybody's going to follow today's trend. And strategic success comes from being able to look deeper at the underlying fundamentals which will allow you to sustain advantage. And so I guess we're out of time, and thank you for those good questions, and it's a pleasure being with you here.